main thing is to protect these characters. Make sure that they still continue to live in the way that you created them.
Remember how excited you were when they announced it was going to make Star Wars Episode 7, 8, and 9? Remember how great it was seeing all your favorite Star Wars characters you've dreamed of seeing back in a Star Wars movie finally return to the screen? Remember when they did it all again? I've said it many times, these Star Wars movies had so much potential. What could have been 3 Star Wars movie masterpieces, 2 out of the 3 have been turned into a hot, steamy SJW nightmare. But let's face it, it's safe to assume that Episode 9 will suffer the same fate of the previous 2 due to what we've experienced so far and how the story is kind of finished at the end of Episode 8. Thanks for that, Ryan! If I'm truly honest with you, I've never been so disappointed as a Star Wars fan as I am right now. I don't know how that's even possible considering there's so many Star Wars films being made. You'd think Star Wars would be in its prime, but it's simply not the case. It's the way these films are being treated, and it's the complete segregation between the filmmakers and the fans which make these new Star Wars films flounder, feeling loveless and almost empty, if you will. The last couple of years I've seen Star Wars fans alienated for not liking these new Star Wars movies, and now it kind of makes you understand how Padme lost the will to live at the end of Revenge of the Sith. Gone are the days where you could put on a Star Wars movie, feel the warmth of the story and escape into a galaxy far, far away on another Skywalker adventure. Now it's either a rehash of a previous Star Wars movie or a film so bold I'm not sure what you call it, but you certainly wouldn't call it good. So we're going to kind of rewrite The Force Awakens, which lends itself to a compelling Star Wars story, which gives room for growth, intertwine old and new characters, and give ample possibilities for exciting things to continue in The Last Jedi and Episode 9, but trying to keep as close to the current plot as possible. If you've seen my Last Jedi version of this is a kind of prequel to that, if you will. Whatever happens here leads on to that version. And before we start, thank you so much for your support for that video. I think that's been my most popular creation on this channel so far. And what that tells me is that you too wanted a different Star Wars movie. Something with more feeling and heart, which is created with Star Wars fans in mind and not the alienation of Star Wars fans. So we should try and create a Force Awakens which isn't a rehash of A New Hope and certainly isn't a Rian Johnson completely shit on every character you write for the sake of being bold, creative and trying to come up across a revolutionary storyteller, but instead comes across as an arrogant, clueless director who has no regard for the fans, creating a Star Wars movie which disappoints more than half of Star Wars fans. It tells me you two wanted a different Episode 7, 8 and probably 9 because let's be honest, we've given up hope for anything good to come out of this new lukewarm trilogy. It tells me you want something with warmth, feeling and adventure. And warning, this would be a story which allows me complete creative control of the movie and in no way has any influence whatsoever from our friendly head of Lucasfilm,
Kathleen Kennedy, and a poisonous story couldn't collaborate us.
All the fixes that would be implemented in the Force Awakens versions will be done so without SJW politics and with the fans in mind. This can be achieved by simply watching some Star Wars videos on YouTube, something I highly recommend JJ Johnson and Lucasfilm
We're messing things up.
should be doing if they cared about creating a good and successful Star Wars movie. The opening crawl on the state of the galaxy. Something which stood out like a sore thumb to me was the severe lack of information about the galaxy at this current time. It was like we was meant to already know what's been going on for the last 30 years since the Return of the Jedi. We shouldn't have to read this information in books or novels. We should be told integral information like this in the movie itself. So the Republic's been thriving, but there's been complete turmoil in the Outer Rim territories. There's been rumors of an ancient terror, an unstoppable force like no other, bombarding planets, draining resources and strategically building strongholds to surround the Republic, a force that goes by the name of the First Order. Because of the growing number of distress signals, the unknown whereabouts of the Jedi, and fears of a new empire like tearing the galaxy, the Senate, in their naivety, nearly finished construction of a Death Star-like superweapon, capable of destruction like no other, which is being built to protect the New Republic and prevent it having to ever be drawn into another galactic war. It is also important to know that Luke Skywalker's Jedi Temple is not part of the Republic. He has learned from the Jedi's mistakes and has separated the Jedi Temple from all politics and allows the Republic to be governed without the influence of the Jedi, and therefore ensures the dark side of the Force would not be tempted by the Jedi's existence on the capital. A small band of freedom fighters led by Poe and Finn, not a stormtrooper, who are a small segment of the Grand Republic forces, have concerns over the existence of the First Order, so they venture out into the galaxy to find proof to hopefully prevent the completion of the Republic's superweapon and bring the Jedi out from hiding. So already we see this could go horribly wrong for the current Republic, which sets that looming charming, adventurous tone for the film. Gives us a great insight on the current situation in the galaxy, and is a great beginning which gives you some excitement and eagerness to know what's to follow. As opposed to this. Look, it's the Empire again. Jakku and opening sequence. For me, the silhouette of the First Order ship coming in shot wasn't entirely exciting or imaginative. Once again, it just felt like an imitation rather than being unique and trying to show another Star Destroyer. I liked Jakku, but when we were introduced to it on the screen, I could not help but think of the Lucasfilm story group telling JJ come up with something familiar, so from the sands of Tatooine, Jakku was born. I think it's important for this planet to have more of a purpose to help set the Star Warsy tone at the beginning of the film. So Jakku is a dumping ground for broken ships. This is not where the Emperor and Rebels had their last final major battle. To me, the last major battle of the Rebels and Empire was an Endor, and will always be where the Imperial fleet was defeated and peace was brought back to the Republic through the means and efforts of Anakin, Luke, Han, Leia, and all the rebels who fought in that battle. That to me shows respect to the story and doesn't feel like it's being stretched. The opening shot should have been an Imperial Star Destroyer, but upon close inspection, we can see it's been converted by the Junkers of Jakku, and acts as a headship which governs who dumps their ships on the desert, ready to be salvaged by the Junkers. This lends itself to some really cool shots of ships hauling other ships across Jakku, showing a planet which works differently from Tatooine. Jakku Junkers use interesting ships to search a desert for these dumped ships, and use a sort of compact ship factory to turn the scrap ship parts into valuable minerals which sell for a good price. The Junker factory ships only come out at night, so the daytime is when Jakku scavengers head out to collect what valuable items they can find to make a living. Introducing Rey. We get to see her daily routine and her heading out from the village on the speeder towards a scrap ship that looks like it's been dumped close by. I think this would be a really cool way to introduce Rey and Jakku, showing it's a planet with a purpose and lends itself to some really cool and interesting Star Wars imagery, creating some warmth and interest at the start of the film. I've told you many times before, these movies needed to collaborate with George Lucas, who could give his creative expertise to make a planet like Jakku interesting. There is no map to Luke Skywalker. The map to Luke Skywalker in The Force Awakens didn't quite make any sense to me, especially after watching Last Jedi. But that's now a recurring theme in The Last Jedi, not only to ruin your expectations in the film, but let all the bad creative decisions affect all the other films too. Why would Luke go to the most remote planet in the galaxy so no one could find him, and then leave a map behind? Once again, because you're a normal person, you start to ask yourself some questions. Who created this map? Why did Luke Skywalker leave it behind? How does the First Order know about it? Why was their section of the map incomplete? How did Lawson and Tekka obtain this map? Luke Skywalker says in episode 8 he's gone to Arc 2 to die, so that basically throws away the entire plot of The Force Awakens in the trash compactor. I think the main driving force of this plot is unraveling the truth about the First Order's existence and stopping Starkiller Base from being built, which in turn brings Leia, Luke and Han into the picture whilst introducing our new Star Wars heroes. I also thought the map to find the person you're looking for to see in the most in Star Wars movie was very unimaginative. So instead of the First Order looking for a droid to get a map to find Luke Skywalker, the First Order looking for planets to turn into multiple bases in the Outer Rim territories to surround the Republic. The First Order are not only creating galactic strongholds, but seem to be delving in ancient Sith dark powers, which makes them a real threat to the galaxy. Therefore already separating it from the Empire and making sure it's not copying a plot of keeping it familiar. Finn, not a stormtrooper. Overall, I kind of like the concept there being a stormtrooper that defects in the first battle because he decided to make a moral choice and not do the bidding for the First Order. Although when you look at it closer, it doesn't take long to realize it was yet another decision which has implications which leaves you questioning the character at the end of the film. In The Force Awakens, among many reasons, there was one particular part which took me out of the film completely, and this was when he picks up the lightsaber to fight Kylo Ren. Finn is a stormtrooper. He may have been trained in melee combat, but he is still a stormtrooper. Kylo Ren is a trained dark side force user with the force at his side, capable of destroying all the Jedi in Luke Skywalker's Jedi Temple and then being trained further by Snoke. So to have this stormtrooper even last more than 5 seconds in melee combat with basically a Sith Lord, one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, not only did I cringe inside, but immediately I started questioning what terrible anticlimactic writing this was, and do the filmmakers even understand Star Wars and have any knowledge of how important Luke Skywalker's lightsaber is. The main problem I had with this is that I thought all the stormtroopers were evil. We don't want to humanize them because our heroes shoot them throughout the film, otherwise it starts to feel morally wrong. Every time I saw this, It made me think, well, maybe that could have been another Finn under that helmet. It might have been his first battle too. This is the fundamental problem with these new Star Wars movies, is the filmmakers trying to introduce modern day politics into these movies, making sure both good guys and bad are inclusive and the line between good and evil aren't so clear. Yes, that's true in real life, but we're not in real life. This is Star Wars. That's what people loved about the original Star Wars movies. These movies were such a success, or shall I say, were a success, because it allowed us to escape in this adventure in the galaxy far, far away and be a hero. But it doesn't stop there. So the major plot change we'd make here is Finn is not a stormtrooper. He'd be New Republic forces. This would mean the line between good and evil is a lot clearer, and the First Order stormtroopers can revert back to being cannon fodder. Rey and Lawson Tekka. In hindsight, the recurring theme in these new Star Wars movies is create something new, worry about his backstory later. Perhaps not at all. A fine example of this is a character such as Lawson Tekka, a man who seems to have great importance in the movie, showing us, the audience, that he has a lot of knowledge about Luke Skywalker, Jedi, and Kylo Ren, but nothing is explained. What was the point of having him in this movie except from just name-dropping things we used to love about the original Star Wars movies? Once again, it falls upon me to take a closer look at his character and make him more integral to the movie plot and story overall, as opposed to J.J. Abrams' method. Rey heads back to a village with a speeder full of parts after her long day of scavenging in the desert and sands of Jakku. She lives with her father-like mentor, Lawson Tekka, who has been watching over her since she was dumped on the planet when she was a young girl. Basically, the dumping ships on the planet metaphorically represent Rey. Rey is a gifted girl, very technically minded, and clearly has something that others don't have. We get the impression Tekka knows what power she has, but chooses not to tell her due to circumstances which have repercussions, which you can find out at the end of my Last Jedi video. Lawson is a great believer in the Force, and kind of refers to it all the time, though he's no Jedi. We see him and Rey eating food, talking about stories of worlds beyond Jakku, and a galaxy full of adventure, like Luke Skywalker in A New Hope.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
Rey looking out into the distance in wonder. She falls asleep after an exhausting day, and then Lawson Tekka force lifts a blanket over Rey. I think it'd be a nice touch to actually find out who the hell Lawson Tekka actually is, as opposed to doing what all these directors seem to be doing now at Lucasfilm. You'll get to find out about these characters in a novel somewhere. To me, in The Force Awakens, seeing Rey all alone living in an 80-80 in the middle of nowhere just seems unbelievable and almost boring. I'm pretty sure that would have effects on your sanity, living in the middle of the desert all by yourself. I mean, I think I would be a bit more rough around the edges if I was in the scorching hot sun with a rebel pilot helmet as the only source of entertainment. Her father-daughter-like relationship with Lawson's Star Trek makes us like her more. It humanizes Rey and connects with the audience this sense of longing adventure, something the new Star Wars movies so desperately lack. I like the imagery of Rey living in an 80-80 in Jakku, but I feel that was more fan service than serving the actual use of the plot. The Star Wars movies have always had this family feel to it, and Lawson Tekka creates his father-daughter-like bond, which is endearing. So connecting Rey with Law already connects this nice dynamic and ties them in nicely into the Jakku environment, unlike the Lawson Tekka we got. Oh, Finn, not a stormtrooper, and Poe Dameron meet Maz. A ship blasts out of hyperspace and on board of Finn and Poe. Banter is shared between the two, saying they've been to countless planets in the Outer Rim and still haven't found anything about the First Order. There won't be anything here to do with the First Order. Nevertheless, Poe suggests landing, checking out the local cantinas to find out any information in the surrounding systems. Poe enjoys a good drink after a long fight. There's always rough sorts in these kind of places, always willing to talk, so they head to Jakku. So immediately we're introduced to these fun characters who are clearly different but share the same goals, so interact well with each other, which connects with the audience. They land at what assumes to be a bar. Finn and Poe, being members of New Republic forces, are humorously trying to fit in with the Jakku locals. They decided to rough themselves up a bit to avoid attracting attention. They head to the cantina style bar, which is half outdoors and half indoors, so it's not just another version of the Tatooine cantina in A New Hope. And to give it that extra gritty feel like you're actually there, the cantinas amongst parked ships and speeders. They start asking questions and have no luck until someone overhears their questions. Questions like that around a place like this will get you killed. Finn and Poe see no one. They look down and see Maz Kanata. So Maz runs to Jakku Junker's cantina bar. Oh, and there isn't a band playing music, just more hologram viewings of pod racing, which the crowds are going mad for. Because it's respectful not to the prequel, something which was fairly lacking in The Force Awakens. Oh, but they didn't care about prequel fans back then. Maz notices immediately Finn and Poe are Republic forces, and what a terrible job they're doing trying to blend in. They grab some blue milk or whatever, and begin asking Maz about what she knows about the First Order. They seem to enjoy the drink, and it appears to be a bit too strong for Finn. Many pilots have found their way into the bar with stories of the First Order, though few live to tell such stories.
The men tell no tales.
Hombre! I think this would be a great way to introduce Maz's character, given her actual importance in the film, which makes sense, as opposed to putting in there to say some stuff about the Force we already know about, which comes across as really cringy, because it was like they were trying to make her like Yoda. She's small, she knows the Force, and she's older than Yoda. Oh. And can someone please tell me why she has Luke's lightsaber? Why would she have that? What's worse is the fact that in 2 films, we still don't know why Maz has Luke's lightsaber. Now, if that's not a classic case of, I don't know where this plot is going, so we'll figure it out later storytelling,
We're messing things up.
then I don't know what is. Remember, these people get paid a lot of money to come up with these stories. First Order attacks. The shot cuts back to Rey, who is disturbed by a dream of some sort, and wakes up in a panic. She feels uneasy. Us, the audience, knows this to be a disturbance in the Force, but Rey doesn't know that. I think it's important to keep seeing Rey have these connections with the Force, but she still doesn't recognize what it is. Although, imagine if this version was filmed by J.J. Abrams. Or Rian Johnson. Rey, of course, wouldn't be having a bad dream. She'd be having a vision where she can foresee what's going to happen, probably pick up her staff ready to take on the First Order, because Rey can do anything. We shouldn't even joke about Mary Sue Rey, because you know that's probably what would have happened. In this version, we're fixing Rey, showing her to be a real, relatable person. This would be a great reveal of the First Order, so I think it's important to make it visually exciting, as we can create some tension, as opposed to this. We then head back into space, and the camera pans out to the Junker's converted Imperial Star Destroyer guarding the planet. When a ship emerges from hyperspace, it's silent and very threatening. Within seconds, more ships blast away from hyperspace, led by the flagship First Order Dreadnought. It immediately blasts the Junker's Star Destroyer into 1,000 pieces, and the planetary takeover begins. Metaphorically, this will show visually the First Order being stronger than the old Empire, and visually show that the old remnants of the Empire have truly been superseded by the First Order. The Junkers don't stand a chance, but are stubborn enough to fight the First Order. Just tweaking small bits like this enable for tension and excitement to build, knowing that Rey, Lore, Finn, Poe, and Maz are all on the surface of Jakku. When you think about it, the whole Takodana castle scene felt out of place and somewhat pointless in the current Force Awakens. I was at the exact location where it was filmed in the Forest of Dean, working on another film, and I remember thinking to myself then, this does not feel like a Star Wars planet. It was a nice forest, but that's where all the other films go to. It was like they ran out of ideas for an interesting Star Wars planet and decided to detour there for the sake of going to Cantina similar to Tatooine, to try and replicate that feeling. Oh. They were clearly desperate to create another Cantina bar scene. Otherwise, Han would have just flew Rey and Finn directly to Resistance Base. Just like Arc 2, they've managed to find an amazing location with zero atmosphere, with no visual presence. To me, it clearly looked like half of this battle on Takodana was filmed in Pinewood Studios. Look at this, look at the destruction here, and now look at this. Everything's flat and there's a couple pieces of rubble here and there. There was a whole castle there, and now there's nothing there. The comparison between those two shots just seemed visually lazy. I think if you're going to introduce a planet, why not give it some importance to the film instead of jump into other planets for the sake of going to another planet? You can clearly see the story group at this point. They're struggling to do what George Lucas did with such ease, by creating these unique planets. Also, this sequence is there to represent the power of the First Order, and how they're able to take control of the Outer Rim planets with overwhelming force. It's here we see Rey lose her home to overwhelming power of the First Order. Troops arrive at Maz's Cantina bar, but because it's full of shady characters, fighting breaks out between the locals and stormtroopers. Slightly drunk Finn and Poe joke that they've found the First Order. Maz surprisingly also engages in combat, like what we saw in the Last Jedi hologram. Actually, no. Not like what we saw in the Last Jedi hologram, because I don't want to be reminded of anything in the Last Jedi movie. The hurt is too much.
And that little annoyed look to her, Mark.
They know they must escape back to Republic, but the First Order are blowing up the surrounding ships around the bar to prevent people from leaving. Maz tells Finn and Poe she knows someone who owes her a big favor, but first she needs to make a personal message. Amongst the chaos, we see her sending a message saying it's time to go. The person receiving the message is Lore Tekka. Lore instructs Rey to raise the alarm. Rey asks from who? From an enemy we've stayed hidden from until now. He instructs Rey that when the stormtroopers arrive, he and the villagers will distract them, and she must go to Maz's bar in the Gozen Badlands and board the ship that's fast enough to escape this planet. So by keeping the main fight in Jakku, tensions are able to run a little higher because you're now invested in that environment. You know it's important to Rey because she lives there with Lore, and you know Finn and Poe are in the cantina, so the stakes are pretty high. Kylo Ren and the Knights of Ren. Something I always admired Star Wars for was that it never had to rely on flashback scenes to tell a story. The story itself was powerful enough to enable us to use our imagination and come up with our own versions. When you're able to do this in a film, it shows you how well scripted scripted it was, and how invested you are in that scene. A prime example of this is in episode 3, when Palpatine tells Anakin about the Sith legend of Darth Plagueis the Wise. This scene was my favourite scene in Revenge of the Sith. It's a powerful moment, dealing in Sith mythology, told to Anakin in a sinister way of how Palpatine basically killed his master. They could have easily added a flashback scene here.
Not himself.
But they didn't, because you're immersed in every single word Palpatine said. So to honour this form of storytelling, in this Force Awakens, we won't get flashback visions of the Knights of Ren. We'll actually see who they are, and consequently set up a formidable opponent for Rey or Kylo to face in episode 9. So their moment shine will be when they attack Lawson Tekka's village. Expecting a boarding party of stormtroopers, a solo, ominous shuttle reveals itself in the distance, perhaps with a weird ship sound, because that will add more suspense to these characters. Everyone is expecting stormtroopers to attack the village, but we get more of a Sith surprise when a masked figure and his dark followers, the Knights of Ren, walk down the ship's ramp and ignite their red lightsabers, a bit like this awesome moment. All of them had unstable red lightsabers like Kylo Ren, represented this ancient form of lightsaber, making them even more threatening, except Kylo Ren is the only one with the crossguard lightsaber. These imposing figures walk directly to Lord Tekka's hut, whilst under fire from the villagers. Kylo Ren freezes all who block in his path, and the Knights of Ren destroy them with their lightsabers. Visually, I think this would look epic, and showcase a new Force ability which makes them even more threatening, and different from the Sith. I think it's essential in this movie that we show the Knights of Ren in action, so when the tides turn in episode 9, we'll see how dangerous they actually are. All we know of the Knights of Ren so far in the second movie is that some of them may be wearing bounty hunter armor, their weapon of choice is an axe and a bat, similar to Snoke's Praetorian Guards, and we know how terrible that lightsaber fight panned out. If you look closely at that fight, you know what I'm talking about. Oh, and they love standing together in the torrential rain. Rey's escape. In The Force Awakens, I enjoyed the Falcon's escape, but it was the first point in the movie I began not to believe in the character. I was unfamiliar with what this sensation was at the time, until later on I realised what a Mary Sue was. The fact that Rey could just jump in a ship, the Millennium Falcon of all ships, a ship you'd think only Han, Chewie and Lando are capable of piloting, and then within a few seconds could perfectly pilot the ship. It just felt like lazy, convenient story writing. The stupid story about Uncle Platt stealing the Falcon from the Ivan boys, who stole it from Duquesne, so the Falcon would conveniently be placed on Jakku for Rey to fly. It just wasn't believable. But in our version, because Rey has now a relationship with Law, when the Knights of Ren show up, she'll have a good reason to leave Jakku, and Maz would be the connection to intertwine her and the Millennium Falcon in this part of the film, which would later mean none of this, and none of this crap. It will turn into a tense escape sequence whilst introducing Kylo and his Knights of Ren. Law and Rey will have their last moments together. Law shouts to Rey to escape. She refuses, but Law tells her she is destined for so much more. Rey, the galaxy needs you. You have a power you always have. It's time for you to discover who you really are. Go to Maz's bar, leave the planet, and go to Hosnian Prime. Rey is surprised to hear that Law seems to know a lot about where she came from, but there's no time to ask questions. Rey, may the Force be with you. Now go. Tearful Rey bids farewell to Law, and we see her ride off into the darkness with a staff on her speeder. Kylo Ren encounters Law-san. They exchange in dialogue, just like in The Force Awakens. Jakku will be another planet under the control of the Supreme Leader, and Law says, "So it's true. The Sith have returned." Kylo is quick to respond, saying they are not Sith, which is the right thing to say because Anakin destroyed the Sith and brought balance back to the Force. Bringing back the Sith would be disrespectful to the entire Star Wars saga. Kylo says they're an ancient Force users. The Knights of Ren are his followers, and they're tasked with a single purpose: to rid the galaxy of Jedi and Sith. Law replies, "You will never find Luke Skywalker, and you'll never destroy the Jedi." Kylo ignites his lightsaber and says, "We will." Then, like in The Force Awakens, kills Lawson Tekka. Rey, whilst on her speeder, senses this, and we see her speeding off into the distance, out in the desert, tears running down her face. The Knights of Ren surround Lawson and then reach out their hands. A red sort of lightning comes out of the hands and drains the Force out of Lawson. Lawson Tekka is actually Force sensitive. He is an old friend of our old heroes, but Rey didn't know this. It would be cool to give the Knights of Ren more of a motive and see them use this ancient Force power we haven't seen before on screen, creating more interest for the characters in this film / trilogy. Rey's journey through the desert. Like I mentioned earlier, I didn't see the point of Tekka. It felt like a boring waste of time with no real consequence to the plot, apart from doing what the filmmaker set out to do. Oh, and give Rey the lightsaber to not explain where it came from and why Maz has it. From early concept ideas, Luke's lightsaber and hand was meant to float into the Jakku atmosphere. Sounds pretty out there, but I kind of liked this idea, if done properly. So this is what we're going to do. In this moment of despair Rey feels whilst travelling alone at night, with the echoing swoop of her speeder, heading through the desert trying to find Maz's bar, she senses something. It's quiet, the stars are brightly lit, and it looks very atmospheric. The force scene kinda kicks in, and the camera pans out into space. Something is floating down towards Jakku as it picks up in speed, as does the force theme. The object enters the atmosphere until we're following what appears to be a lightsaber come crashing down to the surface of Jakku, close enough for Rey to see it, and she has kind of a calling, almost as if the galaxy is showing Rey her path. This scene would create an even stronger air of mystery with the force. We still don't know what it's capable of or how powerful it can be. Rey's calling is like from stories from the Knights of old, showing us the force has chosen Rey. It needs Rey to overcome what is about to unfold, the First Order. We're known to Rey, of course, because she's a scavenger. She knows she can find anything in the sands of Jakku, but she has this moment with the lightsaber. Rey is somewhat shocked that she's found a real lightsaber, so she picks it up, puts it on the speeder, and continues to Maz's bar, changing the plot round a little bit on how things appear on the screen. Moments like how Rey acquires Luke Skywalker's lightsaber is given so much more weight and shows the mysterious significance of the Skywalker lightsaber. I just simply can't understand why it's so difficult for the story writers to come up with moments like this. Something so simple could carry so much depth and resonate with the audience on an emotional level, creating that sense of wonder like in the original Star Wars movies, but instead we get this.
That lightsaber was Luke's. Now, it calls to you.
Wow, great to see you again, Luke's lightsaber.
I'm doing this so that the films will have a longer life, and so that more fans and people can enjoy them in the future.
Rey, Poe, and Finn, not a stormtrooper, escape Jakku. Rey arrives at Maz's bar only to find blaster bolts firing all over the place. She sees two guys pinned down by troopers, so she jumps off a speeder, staff in hand, and engages in melee combat, knocking out some stormtroopers. But in a very unrefined fighting style that's very rough around the edges, it shows that she's capable with the staff due to living in such a tough environment as Jakku. She tells Finn and Poe she's looking for someone called Maz Kanata, so they run into a place of more cover in Maz's bar. Because it's Star Wars and because there's a serious lack of cool Star Wars things in the new Star Wars movies, Maz activates maybe her droid guards. Perhaps they're even converted Separatist General Grievous guards. You know, these guys, who seem to be just about holding back the First Order. She looks at them and notices they're not from Jakku too. She's surprised to find out they're New Republic forces. There's enough time for them to create a bond and meet Maz, but it's not long before the First Order push forward and start defeating Maz's droid guards and the other Cantina locals who engaged in the fight. They're all forced outside where Maz assures everyone help is coming, but it doesn't seem that way. Then, echoing in the far distance, we see Kylo Ren's shuttle come into view. Rey has seen this already and knows what follows. Everything seems to feel a bit bleak for our heroes. Then, out of nowhere, a familiar sound is heard. As it gets closer, its silhouette quickly reveals itself from the sand. The Millennium Falcon arrives. The Star Wars theme kicks in and there's hope of escape for our heroes. There appears to be an extra modification on the Falcon with more guns which are able to fire on the ground troopers. The Falcon's ramp is lowered and hovering close enough to the ground, and Maz shouts to everyone to get on, but Maz is going to stay in Jakku. Everyone is able to board and escape. The heroes make their way on board and strap themselves in. The Falcon maneuvers itself throughout the First Order fighter ships with Rey, Finn, and Poe all at the guns until they're able to leave the atmosphere, pass through the First Order cruisers, and blast their way into hyperspace, leaving Jakku. We then get the introduction of Han Solo and Chewie with Rey, Finn, and Poe. Rey and Han form a stronger relationship when Han notices the lightsaber Rey is carrying. They have a touching moment together as Han explains to Rey that's the lightsaber of Luke Skywalker. Luke lost his hand to his father, Darth Vader on Bespin, and his lightsaber along with it. Han says he's always assumed Cloud City was within the planet's atmosphere, so probably another interference by the all-powerful Force. Rey is shocked and says, "The Force?" Han says, "Don't get me started, kid. I know someone who's going to be happy to see you." Rey says, "Who?" Han replies, "Well, the owner of that lightsaber, of course." Chewie laughs and Rey has a gleaming smile of excitement. Though Han says he hasn't seen Luke for some time, he's learned not to get too entangled in Jedi business. It always leads to trouble, Han says humorously. We could see everyone settle down as the trip to Hostin Prime is a long one. Something we don't really ever see in Star Wars is anyone sleeping on their ships while traveling through hyperspace. Hyperspace travel was actually meant to be quite a long time, but obviously you don't see it in the films. So we'll get to kind of see that there. Chewie's in the cockpit on his night shift whilst everyone is on their bunks resting or whatever. So we get to see another part of the Millennium Falcon. We hear the quiet hum of the Falcon in the background, film, but Rey's still awake, still sad about loss and Tekka, but also staring at Luke's lightsaber. She can hear something, but can't quite make it out. Maybe she'll be hearing some old familiar sounds from the previous Star Wars movies. That would be a really cool moment, which will replace the flashback scene and give us no need for them. So with this scene, it acts as the middle part of the film, where the new heroes have finally met some of the original heroes. They've had a chance to bond together, and now we have an adventurous Star Wars tone set in the film. And that's the end of the first part of this version of The Force Awakens, as it seems to have turned into something way longer than I previously expected it to be. We're only halfway through the film, but I hope this version has allowed you to connect more with the film, bring back that sense of wondrous family adventure. With the subtle changes to characters, locations, and the plot, it's hopefully immersed you into this movie more, and you feel the drive of a developing story which will lead into an exciting second half of The Force Awakens. Of this Force Awakens, which I'm already working on. I think part 2 gives the audience those classic Star Wars moments and reveals that really lends itself to many great Star Wars moments. I think it's safe to say I did enjoy The Force Awakens when I watched it. It did have a Star Wars feel in places which JJ did a good job on. I didn't feel engaged in the story and the characters as much as I thought I would be, but it was enough for me to see past those things and enjoy this movie for what it was. But after watching The Last Jedi and seeing all the potential that The Force Awakens set up, to be wasted in such a disregarding manner by Kathleen
We're messing things up.
and Johnson,
Yeah.
it started to change my perspective on everything, and therefore has extended its borders to the other Star Wars movies and severely damaged my enjoyment for the other Star Wars films, due to knowing what happens to everyone in The Last Jedi. That's probably the worst thing you can do when you create a film. Not only ruin your own film and disappoint the fans, but be so bad it ruins its counterparts too. What's worse is that Lucasfilm is still arrogant enough to say that it's a masterpiece, and whoever didn't like it basically is a troll. Or white male fanboy. Oh, that must be me then. That moment I was sitting in my seat at the cinema with 2 years full of excitement in me, all the amazing reviews from the critics, I mean the shills, and Lucasfilm saying how amazing and beautiful this film was. They were so confident they immediately gave Rian Johnson 3 more Star Wars films to make, to then after watching the film to feel stunned with silence and how utterly betrayed you've been. I can only describe that feeling as to what Yoda was feeling in Revenge of the Sith, when he was sensing all the Jedi getting killed during Order 66 and the Great Betrayal. Anyway, I digress again. I've tried to implement in this version a sense of wonder as this new bunch of galactic misfits find out what they're made of and create a solid friendship, a bond that will carry this movie forward and make sense leading on into the next 2 movies. In part 2 of how to fix the mess that is The Force Awakens, the plot will start to get a bit more serious and epic. So here's some things we'll cover. We'll see the introduction of Hosnian Prime, Han and Leia's home. We'll go back to Luke's Jedi Temple on Hosnian Prime and meet Ben Solo. Yes, you heard it, Ben Solo. And believe me, this will make his character even better. Starkiller Base will get the battle it deserves without being a New Hope, and somehow we'll have to carefully deal with Han Solo. We'll discuss his character in part 2, as I strongly believe stabbing Han was not fitting to this movie. It changed the tone of the film completely and came across as me as really jarring that they went with that choice. Luke Skywalker get his major reveal, and in turn have the reason he needs to become a depressed, given up recluse in The Last Jedi. All these things will happen through the eyes of Rey, our lead character. Like I said at the start of this video, all the things that we fix and change in this version, I've done so with the plot of the Fix of The Last Jedi video in mind. So when you watch The Last Jedi, this will hopefully act as a medication to cure your brain from the complete destruction of literally everything you once loved in our beloved franchise. I hope when you're watching this that you can imagine the story and feel something on an emotional level.
You must feel the force around you. Here, between you, me.
Because I've yet to feel anything good from these new Star Wars movies except resentment, confusion, sadness, and disappointment.
I cannot wait to start shooting, man. God, I can't wait.
He's an asshole.
So until then, let your Force Awakens thoughts be heard down below. I can't wait to read what you have to say, and if you enjoyed this. If you haven't yet joined us here on SkymanUniverse, then subscribe and be part of this growing Star Wars channel. Each and every one of you are important to me. Your opinions and love for Star Wars matters to me, especially as they don't seem to matter to Lucasfilm in this current time, nor can I see that changing in the foreseeable future. I strongly believe it's time for us, the fans, to stop feeling alienated and unite through our love of the franchise, and hopefully one day Disney Lucasfilm will respect the fan base again. This story can remain in our imaginations, so if you want to watch The Force Awakens, or perhaps The Last Jedi, but can't quite bring yourself to sit through a film which basically shits on everything you once loved, then I hope this video and its sequels will give you the Star Wars feeling you once felt a long time ago in a galaxy far, far